Hey guys, coming to you live. This is Monica with Black Sheep, and I'm wanting you guys to come out to the Fentanyl Awareness Walk for Lives. Join us Saturday, September the 20th from 9 to 11. And if you have someone that you have lost due to fentanyl or drug overdose, I want you guys to come out and wear lime green to show your support and wear black to honor the loved ones. This is put on by the Johnson family, and this is at Flowood Nature Park, 4077 Flowood Drive, Flowood. Join us.
Welcome to the Black Sheep Recovery Warfare Podcast.
Welcome to the Black Sheep Recovery Warfare Podcast. I'm your host, John Gallagher, and my co-host, Dr. Monica Weber. Before we get started, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, listen on our Spotify, and follow us on social media so you never miss an episode. Every like, share, and follow helps us spread hope and reach more people who need to hear these stories. Today, we are sitting down with Thomas Reif, the campus director at Mercy House Adult and Teen Challenge in Georgetown, Mississippi, and this is a very powerful testimony of redemption, healing, and the relentless love of God. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you, John.
How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Man, thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to come sit with us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
Amen.
Absolutely. So just before we get started, I want the world to know how hard it is to be serious with John watching me.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, piggyback off of John. I mean, wow, what a powerful testimony. I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, just
you.
jump right in, man. If you want to start with, so I remember from your testimony, you said you're from Columbus, Ohio?
Yeah.
Okay.
So born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. It's most of my family still lives there right now.
Mhm.
Kind of born into just like a life of chaos. From a very young age, all I remember, mom and dad were addicted to drugs. I don't think anyone in my family from a young age ever had a job. So growing up in inner city Columbus, Ohio, just poverty and very poor. And I remember at a young age thinking if someone has a car, they're doing really well. Because I had never even been in a car. And for a long time, my mom had never had a car. My dad never had a car. We walked everywhere. And just kind of growing up in that life of chaos.
I used to think
addiction
that if you lived in a 2-story house, you were automatically rich.
Right.
Yeah.
Or if you go to spend the night at friends' houses and they have like name brand Coke or they're sitting down eating as a family, like, oh my gosh, that was perfect life.
Yeah,
Heck yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So just not even having but when you're born into that, you don't know any different.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even realize that until later when I got adopted. But just a life, just chaos. Mom and dad in addiction. Older sister, about 10 years older than me, in addiction, running around with gangs.
Quick
Violence.
question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned adoption.
Yeah.
Was this your adopted parents you were growing up in this chaos?
No.
Or you just went into adoption later?
I went in. Yep. I was adopted at 14.
Okay.
So into foster care at about 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did it give you a sense of stability, or were you still wrestling with your pain from the past when you got when you got adopted?
Yeah. There was a lot of stuff going on. Going from just violence and SWAT team raiding our house, and we had gotten taken out of the house numerous times by foster care, and going from that into the foster system, I mean, it was chaos. Had a lot of really hard things happen in the foster care system to me and my brother and sister. I was sexually abused in the foster care system. I guess this is the first time I'm really sharing that, publicly. I have shared that, but
Did
Go
your
ahead.
siblings and yourself, were you guys separated, or did you have the same foster family?
My brother and I stayed together, and we were going into foster homes that were kind of transition homes, I guess. So we'd be there for a couple weeks and we'd go somewhere else.
And this was for 4 years?
Nope. So we did that for I can't, I'm thinking now probably 6 months. And then we did go into a foster home with my mom now. She's my adoptive mom, Susan.
She's your mother.
Yep, she's my mom. And so at probably about the age 12, I believe, 11, 12, going back and forth, we got into foster care with her, and she was a single mom. So she saw that me and my brother and my sister needed a foster home, and she took us all in, and not even knowing the chaos that could cause, because me and all my siblings have shared in some struggles. But she just opened her home to us, and that's kind of, you go from chaos in inner city Columbus, Ohio, to that, and it's kind of a shock.
Culture shock.
Absolutely.
So
Shout out to Susan.
Yeah, all three of you guys were able to stay together.
We were.
Praise
Oh,
God.
praise God for that.
Yep.
Amen.
Now we did in that eventually. My mom started. My biological mom was able to pass some drug tests. So we had the option of going back home, and my older sister decided not to. Me and my brother decided we wanted to go back home because there's that dynamic. My best friend was my mom, my biological mom. She was even through all the chaos. When she was doing good, we were best friends, and so getting pulled out of that was just heartbreaking.
Of course.
So we wanted to go back home, and we did, and it was just chaos. Back to the same old thing, and a year later she failed a drug test, and we got taken.
So during the time, if that's okay to talk a little bit about the sexual assault, and I know that can be hard. Did anything get done about it? Did you alert anybody?
No, it was, as a little boy, you think you don't really realize, I guess that it was a bad thing. I mean, you knew it was, but you assume I guess this is just what happens when you're in places like this, and you kind of hide it because you're ashamed of it. I didn't share that with anyone until I went to a military program, 4 years ago, and all these combat vets were standing there talking, and 90% of them had the same thing happen to them. And I was like, this is probably not uncommon, so yeah.
We've had quite a few guests come in that had gone through the foster system, and they've all got the same story too.
Yeah.
There's always been some type of sexual abuse that they had to that they had went through.
Myself included. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
that can be really hard to talk about.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
So tell us what happens next.
Yeah. So we eventually go back with my biological mom, and it's kind of still chaotic. I remember I'm going into, I think, 5th or 6th grade at that time, and I don't know who I am. I mean, I am so insecure. I had gone from going into foster care and not wanting anyone to know that I was the foster kid at school to now I'm going back to just chaos. And now I'm in inner city Columbus, so I was at a school that was predominantly black. I was one of very few white kids, and I got bullied a lot, So my mom couldn't get her life together. She got arrested for child neglect. So then me and my brother, we were all taken back into and the timing might be off on that. The child neglect might have been before. That might have been the reason we went to foster care in the first place. I can't remember exactly the
I have to
times,
ask
but
this, and
yeah.
I ask most people that's been to foster care like myself.
Yeah.
Did you come up with a different name when you went to a different school? Because I did, and some people did. They were just like, you know what? It's like the witness protection program. We're going to change our name.
What I do remember is when I did have to change my last name to Reif. I didn't want anyone to know that. Like, it was a weird thing. Like,
Yeah.
I wanted to hide, and maybe that's normal. I wanted to hide the fact
I think so.
that I was in foster care.
Yes.
Like, I was so ashamed of that.
Yeah.
I was embarrassed by it. Whenever, we were in foster care, we'd visit my mom, at DHS, and that was in Columbus. So they'd have to drive 45 minutes, pick us up at school in the middle of the day, and take us to visitation. And I was so embarrassed on those days.
So she was making an effort. She was passing the drug test, doing the classes.
I think she was. I wasn't super involved. We weren't communicating a lot. And my mom now, Susan, at the time, I didn't understand why. I was so, I was mad. I didn't understand, why won't she let me talk to my mom? This is my best friend. Like, this is, she's being mean. And looking back, I realized she was trying to protect us.
You.
It was really important that she did that. So, but we go back, back to with Sue, my mom, me and my brother do. And I think I was going into 7th grade, and honestly, life was good. I wouldn't say that it was like a super Christ-centered home. We weren't going to church every Sunday. We weren't, doing any of that. But Sue didn't drink. I mean, they're morally an amazing family. And so life was starting to look really good, and I had all these goals and dreams, and
What
wanted
were
to.
they?
Well, my initial dream was to go to West Point and be an Army officer, and where did that kind of start to fall through? I think my sophomore year of high school, when I stupidly started partying and drinking. That's kind of where that dream, I just got lazy in a lot of ways.
Do you think that the sexual assault had a lot to do with the intake of drugs or alcohol?
I don't. No,
Had
to
you
be
blocked
honest,
it out?
I
do you
I
think?
never thought about it again until I was 27 years old. Didn't even cross my mind. And when in high school, I really hardly drank or did anything like that. I mean, occasionally would party, but for the most part, I was in sports and did really good in school. Almost had a 4.0 GPA, and my goal was either join the Army right out of school or go to college. And I kind of mixed both of them. So I got a scholarship at Ohio University, and I started going to school doing Army ROTC. And that was kind of the goal, was just to commission now, not at West Point, but through Ohio University, and commission and go to join the Army. And about 6 months into that, I got a citation for underage drinking. And it was in that moment that I realized, like, I need to make a change, or I'm going to end up getting in trouble and just being an idiot.
And being like your parents.
Exactly.
And I
Yep.
see the drive in you where it was like, I am not doing this. I'm breaking this mold. And
Yeah.
so you probably took that really hard on yourself.
Yeah. And that was, I got to be honest, from a very young age, almost every decision that I made was so that I didn't have the life that my parents had. Every single thing that I did was out of this motivation of, I'm not going to be like my parents. And I'm going to prove to the world that just because you're raised like that doesn't mean you have to be like that. Like, you can, and I recognize, looking back though, had I not gotten adopted, there's a good chance I would have never come out of that.
Yep.
And that was God's hand looking back, although I was an atheist at that time, or not at that time, but later in life. That was God's hand the whole time to pull me out of that.
Amen. So that's high school. What happened after when you joined the military after that?
Yep. So about 6 months into it was 2012 now, that we had just invaded Afghanistan recently. And I kind of realized, like, if I don't deploy now, I'm going to commission as an officer and never have gone over to Afghanistan or Iraq. So I remember sharing with my mom over lunch that I was going to drop out of school to join a unit that was deploying to Afghanistan, and she was obviously pretty shattered. And for me, I'm like super excited about this, and quickly, I went off to some training, and in that training, I met my wife in the Army. So
Really, what did she do?
We were going to, in the military, you mean? She was in truck driver. She was a truck driver and then an engineer.
Wow.
Yeah. So
She's dodging roadside bombs.
that's right. Yeah. And that's what, so by the grace of God, she never
Goodness.
deployed.
Praise God. Yeah.
But that's how we met. And I remember when I got home from that training, my mom was like, the only thing that I hope you didn't do is meet a wife. And I'm like, well,
there was this one time.
I kind of met a girl that might be my wife, and we talked, and it was kind of a neat thing.
Was she a believer?
Maybe a believer intellectually, but not by life, not by practice. Not raised in any way like I was. Has an amazing family. And then shortly after that, I deployed, and during the deployment, it wasn't a crazy, heavy combat deployment. We did see some things, and one of my dear friends committed suicide while we were over there, and since we've been home, I've had a couple buddies commit suicide, and I got home, and I remember for the first time where alcohol kind of became an issue. And from a young age, though, like I said, I always wanted to be a cop. Like, that was 7 years old, as far back as I can remember. I remember Officer Mike. He was a cop in inner city Columbus, and every time I would run to the neighbors to call the cops because my parents were fighting, or my sister almost killed my mom, or whatever crazy thing happened, Officer Mike would show up, and he would put me in his car, and he would talk with me, and just kind of, there was something about that where I was like, I want to be able to do this for another kid one day. So I got home and started struggling drinking, and realized really fast, like, okay, I need to stop this again, because if I want to be a cop, I need to have a very clean background, because I know I'm going to have to pass a background, and I want to be able to be honest on it. So I, was able to stop that quickly. And, as soon as I got back, I moved to Oregon, with my wife, and that's kind of how we landed out there. So,
By this time, do you have any children or?
not yet. So
Okay.
I deployed when I was 18, got home when I was 19, moved out to Oregon, probably when I was about 20. So very young.
Yeah, and you went directly into to the police academy.
Yep. So 6 months after that. So in Oregon, it's a little bit different. You have to get hired first. So now I was in the National Guard, the Army National Guard. I transferred to Oregon and an infantry unit out there. And then I started applying for agencies. The first one I applied for at 20 years old, somehow I was one of the top applicants out of hundreds. I don't even know. So when I got that and I realized, like, oh my goodness, this dream might actually be able to come true, I was super excited. They went through background. At that time, me and my mom we didn't have a great relationship, solely because I was a pride-filled 19-year-old, really an idiot. And I came and I knew everything, and I kind of, put a wedge in that relationship. So simply because of that, they failed me on background, which was fine. So I applied for another agency in Southern Oregon, and I got hired at 21 years old.
Where's your brother during all this?
So he had just finished school to be a surgery technician.
Awesome.
So he stayed in Ohio, and he was continuing there. Yep.
Yeah. So how did it go? How did it work out with the police department?
So I got selected first overall in the interview process, and me and 3 others got hired, and I was super excited. I'm 21 years old. I'm not a believer in any means, and at this time, just to kind of describe my view of God, for the most part, I'm not even thinking of the Lord. Now, I came home from overseas, and just seeing the third world country and what happens in a war zone and all of that, I kind of had this mindset of, if I don't know how God can exist with all this evil that's in the world. I can't comprehend in my mind how a good God could allow this kind of, and that's a question that many people ask. So I kind of went from not even thinking about God to now I'm just an atheist, I would have considered myself. And really, as far as pursuing life, I'm just full of pride. 21 years old, just got hired to be a police officer. I just got married. So now I'm newly married, working in law enforcement, really have no family. My wife's family's in Southern Oregon, so we have, her mom and dad, and they're amazing. I love them very much. We have a very close relationship. And now I'm, working in law enforcement, and very quickly just fall in love with the job. I remember some of my first calls, because I went in and I didn't go to police academy yet. So when I got in, I was just a brand new recruit, and they just threw me in a car. And I had a field training officer, and they just kind of, here comes a call, and they just expect you just to go do it. Kind of that stress, figure it out.
Sink or swim.
Yeah, and it was just absolute chaos.
Any signs at this point of any PTSD?
I wouldn't say so, no. I would struggle. I remember when I first got home, just in large crowds, and there were some things just adjusting, and some anxiety, and but as far as like any flashbacks or any real issues, if it was going on, I was kind of drowning it out with just working, but nothing that I can really think of.
Any alcohol consumption at this time?
Occasional, just like everyone else, that's really not a Christian would think normal drinking. Drinking on the weekends, unfortunately in the law enforcement culture, drinking is very much accepted. So you'd have parties where everyone's just drinking. It's a house with 25 cops, and you're just drinking socially. And so in that aspect, yeah.
When did the problem with drugs come into play as an officer?
Several years into it. So yeah. So I started working, and as time went on, I mean, I just fell in love with the job. I fell in love with every single thing about it. I fell in love with the investigations and that you can really study and learn how to be, good. And I fell in love with studying case law. And, you know, my maybe second or third year in, I don't remember exactly what year it was, but we had the highest homicide rate in the state of Oregon for several years in a row in this town. And I remember I was working weekend night shifts, and some of the there were some weekends where we would go from suicide to homicide to there was an officer involved shooting of some sort to and it would just compound and constantly happen. And one year in particular, we had 12 homicides in a town of about 70,000. So when it's like that, the agency responding to those, typically it's a lot of the same officers. And I remember on that shift, that year alone, as a newer cop, I'd gone to like 6 to 7 of them. And about 5 years into my career, probably responding to the dozenth or more homicide investigation, I had just seen a lot of death. I had, investigated 4-month-old Sid's baby. I'd done CPR on a 7-year-old boy that I just so happened to be around when the call came in that he died, and all these homicides. And I remember one night we had just had the last homicide in the state of Oregon in December, and then this New Year's Eve, and we had the first homicide in the state of Oregon on January 1st. And we were just down the street. We got a call that a girl had shot her boyfriend in the head. And we're like 2 blocks away. So we're like, all of us, we park our cars and we run up. And I remember getting in a line, and my sergeant was in front of me, and we just kick the door in and we go and we run upstairs. And she's standing there. She was standing outside at that time, but her boyfriend's up there, and she shot him in the head. Not like anything else we hadn't seen. I mean, we had seen decapitated bodies and
Was there ever any type of counseling offered to first responders or anything like that?
So
back
normally after a major incident, we would have a debrief, and there would be an option. They were getting better for sure. So we would have our chaplain there, and there would be an option to get counseling. But of course, no one
was going to say that they
absolutely
needed
not.
it, because then they would be weak
That's
being
right.
a man, right?
Yeah, absolutely
That's
not.
usually how it works. So
Yep.
as you're getting into this, do you notice that you're basically becoming, I guess, desensitized?
Absolutely. And 4 or 5 years in, the hard part is you start to wear it kind of a badge of honor. So I started to realize and where it really struck me was a 14-year-old boy had committed suicide in his closet. And, I remember going in there and getting him, cutting him down. And the mom came home because she was out of town, and she came barging in, and she is just crying hysterically, and rightfully so. And, I remember just harshly telling her to get out of the room and just being very hard with her, not caring at all that her son had just committed suicide in their house. And so it was in that moment that I realized something
It's wrong.
was wrong with me, the fact that I didn't care anymore.
What was your marriage like during that time? Surely that couldn't have been.
Yeah. So now at this
Enjoy.
time, let's look at 4 or 5, probably about 5 years into law enforcement. My wife's starting to see some things start to shift. I'm starting to have trouble sleeping. We have 3 boys at this time. I have twins that were about 1 year old. And then my oldest son was, I think, around 3. And I'm working a lot of night shifts on the weekend, and snapping on everything. So I didn't know what was going on. It was, I like a light switch, and I couldn't turn it off anymore. So I'm in full blown hypervigilance mode everywhere I go. You kind of get in this mindset that this us versus them mentality of, if you're not a cop and you're not in the criminal justice system, it's just us versus them. And it's not a healthy mindset, but what it comes from and what it came from was kind of a protection. So I can no longer turn this off anymore, though. So I would come home and I'm angry. If the kids would be crying, it's like I couldn't control my emotions at all. It was like a volcano, and it would just erupt. And I was going off on my wife and kids, and I was punching holes in the wall. And everything is just chaos. And at this point now I'm starting to drink just to be able to go to sleep at night. And through it all, though, on the outside, no one would have known anything but my wife. Even looking back and talking to some folks, they said we had no idea this was going on. And, me and other officers would joke and talk about our struggles, but never go real deep. So we all knew, like, this wasn't normal. The things that we were seeing wasn't normal. Having to do it over and over again, normal people don't have to deal with that. When an officer responds to a call, this is one event in an officer's night versus the worst day of someone else's life, for the most part, or at least one event in their life that's really bad. And an officer will go and go and go 20 times in one night. You might go from a dead child to then an old lady calls because someone stole her recycle cans off of the front porch. And it's like, how do you reconcile that? I mean, I vividly remember an officer-involved shooting. One of our partners, we were looking for a homicide suspect, and it was like 2 a.m, and she went out with a guy and ended up being him. And he had a shotgun, and he pulled it out, and he pulled the trigger, and it didn't go off. And he tackled her. There's a whole thing, and she ended up shooting him and killing him. And as soon as we get on scene, which was like through this whole chaos, we're chasing him in the backyard and doing CPR, and we're doing CPR, and the blood's coming out. We're covered in blood. And shortly after that, you go to a call, and I remember of an old lady calling in about a theft or something. It's like, how do you do that? Do you know how hard that is to, mentally go from that? And then really the big thing is
not to minimize what she's going through.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
But
yeah,
going from a very extreme, to a very low extreme. I could imagine that that would be just
and to help people
crazy.
understand a little bit, to have some grace for officers.
Yeah, a lot of people don't see that. They don't see it from that perspective.
But then they get a cop that's really hard, and they seem callous, like they don't care. Man, you have no idea.
Have any idea where that cop just came
exactly.
from.
Right.
And so to have that understanding.
What is some advice for law enforcement that I'm sure is watching, and maybe some that you even know? What is some advice after what you've been through
Honestly,
that you can give?
My only advice is come to Christ.
Amen.
I do not know, how you would do that job without being a Christian, without knowing that there's evil in this world. And that's what cops respond to. They're responding to the spiritual evil and the side effects of that in a very physical way. So these are all side effects of sin. This is, in being in law enforcement, we know drugs and alcohol. I don't know if I ever responded to a call that didn't involve drugs and alcohol somehow.
It's spiritual warfare, and you're on the front lines of that.
Yeah, and then going from that, and then at 6 a.m. trying to go home and be a dad, and be a father, and I just didn't know how to shut that off. And there's been a lot of studies that have shown military veterans that get into law enforcement, the chances of them struggling with PTSD and addiction are significantly higher. And some folks do it really well. And the ones that I know that do, they're Christians. I didn't know a lot of Christians in law enforcement when I was in. It's just a very dark culture, just like in the military.
So let's talk about the hard stuff. Are you ready?
Yeah.
As if we haven't already talked about tons of hard stuff, but it gets harder for you.
Yeah, let's get into the drug use.
Yeah.
How'd that come about?
Yeah. So, about 5 years into law enforcement, really starting to struggle a lot, and trying to hide it, and drinking at night to go to sleep. And, as I was, working, I worked a lot of drug cases, worked a lot of highway interdiction, and I had access to drugs. And I began to use drugs while working as a law enforcement officer.
Which ones?
I was using meth predominantly. And through doing that, I'm not going to say that it helped, but it numbed a lot of the things that I was feeling.
I can attest for that.
Yeah, it numbed a lot of it. And in a lot of ways, when I began doing that, I felt like I had found some kind of cure for a very short period of time. And then my life just started to spiral. And working as a cop, and then eventually towards the end of my career, working as a detective, working narcotics, while also using drugs, was one of the most chaotic, miserable times in my entire life. And this thought would always cross my mind. Because I was now at this time I was suicidal. So there would be moments where I'd be sitting in my car, my police vehicle, with my gun in my mouth. I'd be on pursuits going 130 miles an hour, no seatbelt on, looking for ways that I could just crash and it would look like it was an accident. Going into really, really high risk situations where there's whether active shooters or homicides, just by myself, hoping to maybe get shot. And at home, everything is just spiraling out of control.
Wow, the enemy was really after you, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had the thought that there's two things that are going to happen. One day I'm either going to die from just being reckless. I'm going to get killed. Or eventually this is going to come out. And surely when it does, I'm going to have enough courage to commit suicide. So I was almost waiting, and you guys can probably relate. I didn't think I was going to make it another week. Honestly, I was never looking that far in advance because death I knew was around the corner. I could feel it. In a lot of ways I wanted it. I was hopeless. Wasn't able to sleep. I was paranoid all the time obviously drugs didn't help with that. And just my marriage was falling apart. And all the while, my amazing wife, I have the most amazing wife on the face of the earth. God bless me with
Thank
my
you,
wife.
Lord.
But through all this, my wife is holding it all together. We have 3 little boys, and she's hiding it from them. She doesn't know I'm using drugs. She has no idea. She just knows, like, gosh, my husband is a knucklehead, and I'm doing everything I can to not just divorce him, because we're trying to hold this image together of I'm a cop, we're a law enforcement family, and we can't allow our struggle to get out, otherwise I'm going to lose my career. So we're holding that together in Thanksgiving 2020. I'm now working as a narcotics detective, and imagine working in narcotics while
Being
using
on
drugs
narcotics.
does not take a scientist to realize that is
Yeah.
not a good idea.
And no one noticed? None of your coworkers or anybody?
I'm sure if a lot of them completely cut me out of their life, so I haven't got a chance to talk and kind of reconcile any of that. But a lot of them, when I initially did, said we had no idea.
Wow.
And I hit it really well. It's not like I was using a lot. It was kind of a maintenance amount, if you want to say that. I mean, any amount in working as a cop shouldn't have been doing that, but it wasn't enough to be looking like I was high. You would never know. Even if you looked at my mugshot, you wouldn't really know that I was.
So no
using
weight
drugs.
loss or anything?
No, there was weight loss. I probably lost about 20 pounds.
Okay.
Always weight loss.
Yeah, there was definitely weight loss, and I got called out to do surveillance on a drug trafficker that we had been following for quite some time, and I had actually not used any drugs for a while up to that point. I don't know exactly how long, but I had been sober for a little bit, several weeks, and I was excited. I was like, you know what? I think I might actually get over this, and if I can deal with this, I might be able to move on and figure everything else out. I'll start going to the VA. I'll start doing whatever I need to do. And immediately I got this thought, you should go to the department and look in evidence and see if there's anything in there. And I did, and there was a vial that said cocaine on it. And I went into the evidence locker, took out enough, the tip of my pinky of a white powder that I assumed was cocaine, and went and snorted it. And the last thing I remember, I got on my detective vehicle and I called the sergeant. I let him know what vehicle I was going to be in and kind of what we were doing. And that's the last thing I remember. I got brought back to life at the hospital. So I go from getting in my vehicle to being brought back to life. And all I hear is he's alive. And I have several doctors and my lieutenant and my sergeant. And the lights from the hospital bed are in my face. And there's all the beeping. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm alive? So I'm I had no idea what had happened. Later come to find out it was 99% pure fentanyl. And
That is insane because, the first major time that I OD'd, I had taken just a very small amount. And when it was broke out in front of me, it was I looked at it and laughed. I was like, well, that ain't gonna do nothing. And I was like, what is that? This is when fentanyl really hit the scene. and I was already used to snorting and shooting heroin, and as soon as it hit my nostril, I dropped dead.
Mm.
The moment.
Wow. Yeah.
So imagine
and
you
it
taking a
took-
pinky.
Yeah, and
amount.
it took three times to get Narcan to get me back to life.
Wow.
And it was a very, so when you say it was that amount
Yeah.
and you survived that,
Jesus.
God bless. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a miracle, bro.
And it was. And here's
99%. Wow.
Yep. So obviously I didn't just overdose in a driving vehicle and end up at the hospital, So
Right.
as I overdosed, complete respiratory failure. As they went back and looked at video, I'm on the wrong side of the road. My whole head is blue, being held up by the seatbelt, and I'm driving 45 miles an hour on the wrong side of the road, sometimes on the sidewalk. I crashed into 3 vehicles, and this is the moment. So I don't want to leave this out either. 2 weeks prior, our marriage was falling apart, just catastrophic. This was going to end really bad, and my wife, she cried out to God, and she said a very, very simple prayer. She was like, Lord, something has to change. And that's all she said. Something has to change. Can you please change this? And we weren't going to church. We weren't, I don't even know if we had a Bible in our house. But just in faith,
Well, he is close to the brokenhearted.
yeah.
Amen.
And she just cried out, and we would have never imagined the change that this was going to bring, because I was an atheist. I didn't believe in God at that point in my life. I was arguing with Christians that God didn't exist, and she cried that out, and then my crash happened, and this is where God really stepped in. At the moment of my crash, there was an ambulance in the intersection. Like, what are the odds of that? And they knew I was a cop, so they cut all my clothes off and started life-saving procedures, and threw me in the back of the ambulance, and not thinking that this is a drug overdose.
Right.
I was working as a narcotics detective. So when the first responders show up, the last thing they're thinking is drug overdose. We need to Narcan him. So they didn't even do that until I got all the way to the hospital, and we're talking probably 10 minutes away.
Wow.
And right before, as the crash happened, they told one of my good friends, Sergeant Hobson, to go to my house and tell my wife basically that I had died in a crash. And right before he went to go knock on the door, he got a call from the hospital saying, hey, don't say he's dead.
Yeah, please don't tell her that.
Yeah, please don't say that. We brought him back to life.
Yeah.
Tell her she needs to get up to the hospital. So now everything is just chaos. I'm being brought back to life. I know what I did. But immediately I go into this kind of panic mode of, well, I need to make sure no one else knows what I did, so that I can get home and commit suicide. And that's kind of all
That was
I
the
was
backup
Mhm.
plan.
That was
Yeah.
it. That was the
Yeah,
backup
that was the
plan.
backup
Yep.
plan. Yeah.
And I knew, like, okay, now that this has come out, this is going to be easy. I right now I'm more suicidal than I've ever been. I guess you could. It wasn't really. I didn't plan this, obviously. But it's just falling into place where now I'm going to have the courage to do this.
Amen.
And my wife shows up at the hospital, panicked. She knows that I'm struggling, so of course, her first thought was never drug use, but she knows, like, what in the world is going on. And they do field sobriety tests. She kind of realizes that because they told her somehow he overdosed on opiates, and now she's like, what in the world is going on? If you can imagine, law enforcement wife, 3 little boys at home, picture perfect life on the outside. Never in a million years would she think my husband's using drugs. And I got released from the hospital that night, and I went home, and I don't remember all the details, but I know there were several, obviously, of my colleagues that were still kind of shocked, and we had a very close relationship at that time still, until before they found out what really happened. So they took most of my guns, because they just assumed that I was probably going to be suicidal. And I woke up the next day, and just my whole life, just a realization that everything is changed forever now.
Did you get offered any type of help or rehab from your employer?
Initially, once they realized what really happened, it was in full investigation mode.
Okay.
And I understand that. And so, within a couple of days, I'm trying to think of the exact timeline. I've never really talked in detail about any of this. I want to say from the hospital, Sergeant Hobson, I think he took me home. And he kind of shared that it was going to be okay, and was really a brother in that moment. And, you know, the next morning I remember waking up, and of course I'm in full blown suicide mode, and I'm thinking, how can I do this? How am I going to do this? My wife and kids, what are they going to think? Do I do it at my house? Do I do it in the woods? Like, where are all my guns? I don't have any guns, you know. So I'm thinking of all this stuff, and I remember Hobson came to my house with his pastor, and I was home alone at that time, and he walked in, and him and Pastor Rich, and they walked in. They said, "Hey," so during this time, Hobson was kind of backsliding, if you want to say, still going to church, still serving, but not fully doing his calling and what God was calling him to. And as soon as my crash happened, God had spoken to him and said, "You need to go to Thomas's house, and you need to tell him that I love him and I have a plan for his life. You've known him for this many years, and never once have you told him about me." So he was super convicted about that, and my crash caused him to rush to my house, and he's like, "God sent me here to tell you that he loves you and he has a plan for your life."
Yeah, I was supposed to be here yesterday to tell you this. Sorry, I'm late.
Yeah,
But,
that's right. I'm a little late, but
Sorry you had to go through dying in the crash for that to happen.
So, you know, he shares that, and you know, of course, when you step out in faith like that, you might think that the person's going to be like, "Oh yeah, this is the whole solution I've been looking for," and it wasn't like that.
No.
I was mad. I was like, "Listen, dude, I don't believe in God. I don't even know why you would come to my house and say this." My wife walked in during this time, and she was infuriated. She was mad. She's, of course, now finding out that I was lying to her this whole time, and you know, she probably won't care if I share this, but, you know, she said some choice words, and my wife, even before she was saved, didn't cuss. Like, she was born with a flesh that I don't have. Like, it's like she was born holy. I know that's not theologically accurate, but she's just an amazing woman. And so for her to cuss, it was some serious stuff going on, and she was mad, and kind of told them if they need to leave the house, and they need to take me with them, because I'm not welcome in my own home anymore. Rightfully so. And, you know, I remember them sharing the gospel, and I had never been told in my entire life, I looked back and I thought about it, that you could have a relationship with God. Like, I didn't know that was a thing.
You and I shared,
So, yeah.
You and I shared that. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't understand I didn't understand what relationship with Jesus meant or understood that until my encounter.
Yeah.
Like, I grew up, the way I grew up was I you know, we went to church on the holidays,
Right.
or whatever, for whatever reason. But I knew all the stories, the party of the Red Sea, the jump, but I never knew him
Right.
until after the fact. I didn't. That was never explained to me,
Yeah.
that you could have an actual living relationship
Yeah.
with the Lord and Savior.
Yeah.
That's
And
a
it
beautiful
just
thing.
kind of, you know, as he said that, I remember I wasn't super excited at first. Nothing really changed. And then when everyone left and my wife left, and I was at home alone, and it's late at night, you know, I began to really think, like, what does that mean? I can have a relationship with God. Like, who is this God that I say I don't believe in? And he's sharing that, you know, if I surrender my life to him, like, he is going to walk me through this. And so I really began to think about that. And I remember that night, this is where everything really started. I cried out to God, and I said, "Lord, if you're real and you reveal yourself to me, I'm going to give you my entire life." And that night I had a dream, and I remember, I know it was Jesus. I couldn't see him, but I knew there was a person in just all white, and it was glowing. And I remember in this dream him saying, "Thomas, I love you. Come to me, and I will forgive you for everything." And I just woke up, and I remember just confessing, and I was confessing every sin that I could think of. And this is within days. And I woke up in tears, and I'm crying. I'm on the couch. You know, our life's in chaos. So my wife's sleeping in the room, and I'm not allowed to sleep in there. And, you know, but I remember just waking up, and I'm crying, and I'm crying out to God, really. And it was in that moment that I made a decision. I'm going to be serious about this, and I'm going to try to figure out what in the world this means. So I remember calling Hobson. I said, "Hey, man, I don't know what this means. I don't know what having a relationship with God means, but I'm willing to really kind of explore this with you." And within a few days, there's so many things, but I ended up getting a Bible from our police chaplain. and kind of went on this journey of trying to figure out who this God was, that supposedly used another man to come and talk to me and say that he had a plan for my life. So yeah,
Strategically placed an ambulance at an
right.
intersection.
Well, and yeah, exactly. I began thinking about that very thing too.
Yeah.
Like, okay, the doctor said it could have killed over 200 people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why did I live? How did I live?
Didn't run over anybody on the sidewalk.
No. I did crash into 3 vehicles, and there were people in those vehicles, obviously. But by the grace of God, no one was injured.
Amen.
And so now I have this little glimpse of hope, but I'm still in chaos. And I remember, you know, within days, another officer that I worked with, she was an amazing woman, still is, and she allowed me to stay at her house, and kind of to keep me safe, because they knew that I was not in, you know, just the fact that I had done that, something was going on for a while, and they knew I was probably going to be suicidal, and I'm pretty sure I was vocal about that. You know, and one time I remember, now that we're sitting and talking about it, I had left her house, and I had a handgun, and I hadn't gone to any programs or anything yet, and I left, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to go commit suicide. And as we were driving, I'm like, you know what, God, if you're even real, I know I cried that prayer and I had that dream and all this stuff, but I'm still just going through all this chaos. And I was like, God, if you're even real, there's going to be someone that I know that's going to drive past me. And sure enough, within 2 vehicles, a cop that I worked with drives past me. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. So I pull into this parking lot, and then Hobson shows up, and he just parks behind me. And I'm like, how does he know I'm here? Like, what in the world is going on? He's like, I saw you pull in here. I decided I need to pull over. And of course, I was planning on going to commit suicide. So it's all over me. And now I'm crying. And he's like, do you have a gun on you, Thomas? And I'm like, I do. He goes, give me the gun. And he took it. And I'm like, all of these little things were God's hand just keeping me from that, you know. And shortly after that, I got a call from, I knew I was going to get arrested. You know, I knew what I had been doing. I knew that I had a DUI crash. There were a lot of things that were going to happen. And I got a call from my attorney saying like, hey, just to let you know, tomorrow morning, the state police are going to come to your house and arrest you. Just be prepared to turn yourself in. And I was sitting outside, and you know, I had really made that decision to follow God, and I was like, I wasn't going to drink, I wasn't going to do any of that stuff, and I hadn't since that crash. And within a few weeks, I got that call, and I decided, you know what, I can't do this. And I knew that I had one more gun hidden in the closet. I went and got it. I don't even remember what it was now. And I got a 100-round drum, and I got a liter of vodka that was still up in the cabinet, and I kicked every single one of the doors of my house in. Some of them, you know, kicked the whole bottom out, punched holes in the wall, just destroyed my whole house. My wife is in the room. My 3 boys are in the house. You know, they're 1 and 3. And I'm walking through the house saying, I'm never going to see you again. I'm sorry, but I'm going to go commit suicide. And I said this to my 3 little boys. By the grace of God, they don't remember any of that. And I walked out of the house, and I got in my truck, and I went to the woods, and that's the last thing I left my wife. And I drive into the woods, and I knew that as soon as I got there, I was going to drink the whole liter of vodka, and I planned on sitting by a tree and just committing suicide. And so I got out in the woods, and I drank the whole liter of vodka, and now my wife had called 911 and said, hey, my husband just left the house with a rifle. I don't know where he's going. And as soon as I got in the woods, you know, I made some really dumb phone calls. I don't remember any of this, but I threatened to kill my police chief, and telling this to police officers. And so now the whole county was looking for me. They had no idea where I was, but they know that Thomas is suicidal. He has a rifle. He's threatening to kill the chief of police. This is a big situation. And as I'm sitting there in the woods, with this rifle in my mouth, all I'm thinking about in this moment is I'm picturing my wife and my 3 boys. And I'm thinking about this thought of going to hell, you know, and I'm like 2 weeks into this, and I'm picturing my kids and my wife. And then I have this thought of, I could go to hell if I do this. And cause I'm not even convinced that I was saved yet. I was on a journey, you know, and I hadn't fully had my faith tested, as Peter will say, to be genuine yet. But God was working on me. And I I remember I called. He was a sheriff, but he had also been in Afghanistan when I was. So he was the only person I felt I could trust in that moment. And I was like, hey, I don't know what to do. And he goes, just tell me where you're at, and I'm going to come pick you up. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this because I thought he would, I could trust him. And sure enough, I tell him where I'm at. As soon as I see his truck lights in my stupor, now I had decided I'm not going to commit suicide. I start shooting at his truck. I'm like, this will let him know where I'm at. And I was like, what a dumb decision. So he calls me and goes, dude, are you shooting at me? And I'm like, yeah, I wanted you to know where I was at. He goes, stop shooting at me, please. And I'm
I
like,
feel like I'm watching a movie.
I'm like,
I-
okay, I'm gonna.
I feel like I'm watching a Netflix series.
Yeah,
right now.
no, it's Lifetime.
Yeah.
It's Lifetime for sure.
So I was like, all right, man, I'll stop shooting at you. I'll come down to you. And he gets me in his truck and his.
So wait a minute.
Yeah.
So he still approaches you after you
Oh,
shot
yeah.
at his vehicle.
Yeah, we had been working
Wow.
together for years. So we had gone on calls together, and
Okay.
there's just a brotherhood.
He knew you weren't serious.
He
it
knew
was just
that
a
I
little
was-
shot. Yeah.
That's right. He knew that I wasn't trying to
Okay.
kill him. I was just being an idiot.
What did you feel like when you finally got around somebody that was willing to listen?
In a way, I was relieved. But there was also just the panic of, I knew that I was going to have to face this. And there was no way that I was just going to be able to get around it. So, I was still suicidal. And he took me to his house, and, we called the actual sheriff, as well as several other officers. And, I agreed that, I'm just going to go turn myself in tonight. So he took me down to the jail, and I turned myself in at probably 3 a.m, bailed myself out. And it was incredibly difficult because I wasn't just turning myself into some random jail. Like, I had arrested hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people and worked with all of these officers that I'm now getting booked in by.
So now you mentioned earlier it was you versus them, and now you're one of them,
And
right?
now in my mind,
Right.
the shame and the humiliation and just the realization that, my goodness, I was a failure. And I remember through all that, the thought had hit me. I had been spending my whole life not to become my father, and yet here I am looking no different than him. And here I am about to give my kids the exact same life that I had, because they were very young. And of course, in that moment, I still didn't know what the gospel was really. I didn't know what life in Christ was. I didn't realize he can really change everything and give everything back. So I'm still pretty hopeless. And the thought was, surely I'm getting a divorce. I'm never going to see my kids again. This is never going to recover. So I just gave my 3 boys the same life that I had, that I've been working so hard not to give them. And I got released from jail. I bailed myself out. And now, everyone's kind of come around me a little bit, solely because they know that I'm very close to committing suicide. So now we're trying to get into different programs and what can we do to make sure that I don't commit suicide. And I was, when I got released from the jail, I was also in that mindset. So I went from being full-blown suicidal to, I need to do something to fix this. I still didn't know what that meant, but I remember I had a Bible, and I was praying now, and I had this peace that I just couldn't explain. So going through all of that, I still didn't know what that meant, but I had a peace that surpasses all understanding, as the word says, and I couldn't explain that, but I knew that it was nothing I had ever experienced in my life. And I went to a week-long program in California. We paid out of pocket for a secular program for law enforcement officers, and it was really just trauma-based therapy. And we went and we would talk for 10 hours and just process through everything in life. And I remember, they would do chapels at that little retreat in the woods in California. And these are a bunch of cops. And they weren't just cops, because all my partners and everyone, rightfully so, had completely turned their backs on me. And that was really hard for me, because I'm like, guys, we did a lot of really hard stuff together. We've been shot at together. We've saved lives together. We've done all this chaos together. And the very people that I felt I needed, because in my mind, it was the job that had caused a lot of this, even though it was my own actions and my own sin. But these are the only people I had. These are my friends. These are my brothers. And now I have no one. Because everyone because what I did, a cop stole drugs from evidence. We can't associate with him. And I get that. So it was very hurtful. So I'm finally in this program where these are cops and they know what I did, and yet they still understood. And I finally felt like I had a brotherhood again. So I went to that program, and then I was told about a program called Mighty Oaks Warrior Programs. And it was a Christ-centered Christian week-long program. So now I'm super excited. I have all this healing and this trauma, but now I get to go see what this relationship in Christ means. And I was really excited about it. They flew me out to Texas, and probably still, in my opinion, the greatest Christian program for veterans that there exists anywhere. And they flew me to Texas, and there's like 20 other veterans, and this whole staff of combat vets, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, narcotics detectives, law enforcement officers. I mean, a bunch of guys that I can relate with. And we just spent a week together. And in that time, throughout that process, they started to point out the fact that all the chaos in my life was due to my own sin. And they really painted this picture, David talks about in the Psalms of swimming in his tears in bed. And when you have PTSD, you don't sleep, and you cry. And I remember those nights of just being cold sweats and swimming in my tears in bed. And I'm like, they're describing how sin will cause this. And I'm like, my goodness, all my life I've been told it's my past and the trauma and all the things that happened as a kid and what you saw in the military and what you saw in law enforcement. And I can't, and it's like this light, went off in my mind. And I'm like, it's because of sin, and it's because of my sin. It's because of sin in the world. And then they share the solution of Christ is the answer for this. And I remember 4 days into this program, all these veterans and stuff are standing up, and they're telling me my story. Deployments, law enforcement, dead kids, homicides, officer-involved shootings, all this crazy stuff they had been a part of. It led to addiction and chaos and suicide. 22 veterans a day commit suicide. Absolutely astronomical. And they're sharing this, and then they say, Christ changed it all. Christ changed it all. And I used to think of Christians as sissies. I don't want to go to church. They look weird. They smell weird. They talk weird. They're weak. That's not a real man. And then all these, what I would picture as real men, are standing there saying, Christ changed it all. Christ changed it all. And I sat there and I thought, either these guys are crazy or I'm missing something. And it was in that moment that I completely surrendered everything. And I got baptized in a cow trough. And I remember my wife is hanging on for dear life at this time. And beyond any better judgment, beyond what people were telling her, she's hanging on. And I called her and I said, I think I might be called to ministry. I was like, I don't know what this means, but all I know is I just found the cure for cancer. Because now, after that, like, I am just on this high. And I'm like, oh my goodness, if I seek him, and I had this realization that my only job in life was to seek a relationship with the Lord. And if I did that and I sought, seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things will be added, that God was going to fix this. And I went home with that, and I called my wife and I said, I think I might be called to ministry. And she's still hopeful but hopeless at the same time, holding our family together.
She wants to see some fruit.
Exactly.
Right.
And she's like, okay. And I remember coming home and she's like, well, you were a drug addict and I'm sure you're just addicted to this. So what's new? And she was rightfully so, was like, dude, you just flipped our whole life upside down. This sounds really cool, but let me see something really change. And then of course, 2 weeks later I had to go to court, and I remember sitting in court, and I was in veterans court, and I kind of was told that this was a big deal, and I knew that, and it wasn't just going to go away quickly. So as we're talking in court, I'm not even listening anymore. All I'm thinking about, as soon as I leave this courtroom, I'm going to go commit suicide. I had just had this spiritual high. All the ministers at Mighty Oaks had told me, when you get back, be prepared. You're going to be attacked. And I just ignored it. I thought this was all, I'm like, man, I came to Christ. I gave the Lord my life.
Now the real attack begins.
And I didn't I thought everything was going to go away. Honestly, like I left thinking, well, if I come to Christ and I just walk in obedience, he'll make everything disappear. Like all these criminal charges, maybe he'll make them all go away and we'll just move on in life. And why I had that mindset, I don't know. It's not like they ministered in that way. It's just in my mind, that's what I thought. And I left that courtroom that day and immediately went and got a whole bottle of Benadryl. I Googled it. I said, what will commit suicide without a gun? And I got a whole bottle of Benadryl, a liter of vodka, got a hotel room, and went in the room, took all the Benadryl, drank all the vodka, laid on the bed with a Bible on my chest and a coin that I had gotten from Mighty Oaks. And I sent a text to my wife that said, hey, tell the boys I love them, and I want you to know I love you. Have a good life. And of course, as soon as I sent that, my wife knew, like, because she hadn't heard from me in 2 hours. She's already freaking out. And she's like, what in the world is going on? And I just laid on the bed. And I knew within a matter of some time I was going to be dead. And about 5 minutes into it, I could feel my throat starting to get tight. And I realized, like, oh my goodness, like I'm actually about to die and I do not want to do this. I ran down to the front desk, and there's police notes that say this, but I told the front desk attendant, hey, can you please call 911? I just tried to murder myself. And it's kind of funny now because we've gotten a printout of that, but it's like, I tried to murder myself. That's really what I said. And I remember standing in the hotel lobby, waiting for everyone that I used to work with to show up so I could fight them all, because I was just full of anger. And now everything that I had learned, it's like it just went away. And now I'm full back in hopelessness. And I'm like, what in the world kind of roller coaster is this? And they all showed up, and I don't remember a lot of this. Just talking with officers and my attorney, I fought all of them, probably 10 different officers. Now my wife shows up at the hotel. Here I am, completely belligerent, suicide attempt, fighting all these guys I used to work with. And she's standing there watching all of this.
And you're on Benadryl.
And I'm watching a
During all
movie.
of
I'm
this,
still sitting
yeah.
here watching a movie.
Yeah.
It's great.
Wow.
Yeah, and I don't, they strapped me down to this bed, and again, God knew all of this. The hotel I chose was like 3 minutes from the hospital. I didn't even think about that. That wasn't, it was, you could see the hospital from the hotel.
He orders your steps.
That's right.
Yeah. So I made that decision, and
You think you made that decision.
that's right. So they get me up to the hospital, and now, I don't know what was going on, but now I'm completely paralyzed, but I can see, and I'm aware of the fact that I'm dying, but I can't talk. So I'm strapped to this bed, and all I'm trying to say in my mind is, I took all this Benadryl. You guys need to do something, because they just put me in a room, and maybe this is fuzzy because I don't remember a lot, but I remember the thought of, I wish I could tell them that I'm dying, because they have no clue. And sure enough, I go into full respiratory failure, and I remember, through that time, my heart rate stopped. I aspirated, so I vomited while I'm strapped down to a bed. So now they're all in panic mode, and I don't remember any of this, but just talking to my wife, talking to the doctors afterwards, they had to do emergency surgery, and then I was in a coma. And so now my wife, having to go through everything she went through. Now her husband just attempted suicide, and
she is a soldier, straight up.
She
yeah,
is.
and she's I remember waking up out of this coma. I've never had surgery in my life up to this point. I had never been intubated. My wife comes in, I'm intubated, I'm on a ventilator to breathe. And I wake up out of the coma, and, I have a catheter in, I'm intubated, and I'm like, what? I'm like, what is going on? I was in full panic mode. They're telling me, like, hey, the machine is breathing for you, don't breathe. And I'm like, what do you mean? Don't breathe. Hey, I need to go to the bathroom, just pee. And I'm like, what do you mean just pee? Well, you have a catheter in. I'm like, oh my goodness, what in the world happened? And about 3 days later, I get off the ventilator, and I can't talk. I'm recovering from being in a coma. And I remember the first thing, I bless my wife's heart, where she was at. But the first thing she said was, hey, I can't do this anymore. I just want to prepare you that I'm going to be getting a divorce. worse. So now I just attempted suicide, and now I know that my wife's going to leave me, and I am completely hopeless. And I would like to say that, oh, I made this decision and now I'm thinking about God, but in that moment I wasn't. And for the next 30 days, there was actually some officers that came and visited me, and the chaplain, and but I remember the chaplain told me, in the hospital, all he said was when he walked in is, Thomas, when are you going to start living the life that God created for you? Like, when are you going to man up? Like, why are you doing this? And I thought in that moment, I'm like, dude, I just attempted suicide. Like, you're going to say, like, how are you doing? None of that.
Shout out to the chaplains in this world.
Absolutely. and you would, you would get that. And his son's a police officer, and he was a police chaplain. So I had a relationship with him.
Is this the same one that gave you the Bible?
It is.
Wow.
Yep.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And I was, in the moment, I'm like, dude, this guy's a jerk. But within a matter of a month, now I'm on a psych hold. They won't release me from the hospital. And they transferred me to a military program, kind of VA hospital up in Portland, Oregon. And I was the only one there that couldn't leave. I was on a psych hold by the state, and they kept me there for almost 4 months. And 30 days in, someone came up to me and shared the gospel again. And immediately I was like, what the heck am I doing? Like, I made this decision to follow Christ, and I knew that if I seek him, and that's my only duty in life, and I walk in obedience to his word, that he's going to change everything. Why am I living like this? And it's like it just completely flipped. And we're talking within, 30 days, 45 days of the baptism. And it's like from that moment forward, I just devoured the word of God. And I would be in a military hospital, and we would do group counseling and individual counseling and all this trauma stuff. And I would sit at the end of the hall by myself at a table and just read the word of God from 5 a.m. till 10 o'clock at night. And that's all I would do. And I had to get to know this God that everyone is saying I can have this relationship with. And as I did that, he just started to change things in my life. I started to realize the lies that I had believed. I started to realize that it was all really my fault. Honestly, it was my decisions, my sin. I had to take off this badge of, oh, if you knew what happened to me when I was a kid, if you knew what happened to me in the military, if you knew what I saw as a police officer, I have every right to be this way. Because we as people can do that sometimes. We wear it as a badge, like this victim mentality in a way. And I started to realize it was all me. It was me the whole time.
Now you're being transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Exactly. That's right. 100%. Yep. And through that process, I began to just repent of sins. And I remember calling my wife and just confessing everything that I could think of to, and I knew I had to be honest. And the Lord had led me in that, Thomas, if you ever want your marriage to be restored, you're going to have to be honest. And I began confessing to my wife every single thing. I mean, I was honest about the drugs and every sin that I had ever committed against my wife. I just began to confess to her. And I remember when I was doing that, my first thought was, God, I don't want to do this. And the Lord gave me this picture of Abraham and Isaac. And he was like, Thomas, I am testing your faith right now. I'm telling you to do something. Are you willing, at the sacrifice of your wife leaving you? She's already been through enough. Now I want you to call her and tell her, be honest about your whole life. The drug use, everything that you've ever done, you need to be honest. And he's like, are you willing to do that at the risk of your wife divorcing you? And I was like, well, I don't know. Because right now, the only thing I have hope in is my wife and kids. And but I decided, you know what, I'm gonna have this conversation with my wife, and I'm gonna confess every sin that I can think of. And immediately she hung up the phone on me. And I'm like, okay, God, that did not go the way that I thought it was gonna go. And the next morning, and this is where my life absolutely changed forever. Nothing was ever the same from this moment. I'm in a hospital on all these psych meds, antidepressant, Zoloft, sleeping meds, anti-anxiety, you name it. They just threw the whole thing at me. And 5 a.m. I was woken up and by the Lord. I knew that. And it was like a light came out of the ceiling and just entered into my chest. And I was completely filled, and I started to pray in a language that I couldn't understand. And I'm a couple months into this, and I don't know what any of this means. I didn't know what speaking in tongues was. I don't even know if I had read that in the Bible yet. Maybe I did, but I glanced over it because I didn't understand it. And and I can't control this now. So I get in the shower and I cover my breath, cover my mouth because I'm trying to be quiet. And I remember the Lord, I could almost see my heart beating. And I remember the Lord saying, Thomas, I am in control of your life. Do you trust me? And as I stopped that encounter with the Lord, I sat on my bed and he led me to Acts chapter 2, where the apostles were in the upper room and they were baptized in the Holy Spirit. And I remember this realization that, oh my goodness, like he really is who he says he is. And immediately I was healed of everything. Never once struggled with PTSD again, never struggled with anxiety again. And the first thought that I had, though, was I was absolutely terrified. Like the fear of the Lord had struck me, and I didn't want to tell anyone. I didn't want to talk for 2 days. I didn't leave the room. I was just so afraid because I had this realization that if God wanted to, he could take my life. And now this life that I have is to live for him and him alone. And imagine being in a secular psychiatric hospital and having an encounter like that with the Lord.
They thought you were crazy.
They
huh?
thought I was absolutely out of my mind.
Religious hysteria.
Yeah.
Documentation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And, part of this program, they had the trauma side and then they had a 12-step side. So they did, not openly share the gospel, but if you were a Christian and you were in this program, you could use the Bible instead of the big book?
The big book.
I've never gone through AA or any of that. So, the first person I wanted to tell was the guy that led that. So I remember telling him, and, when you tell someone something like that, it's like, how do you receive that? It's kind of hard. And within a few days, I told my psychiatrist, and I remember 3 days after that, the psychiatrist got a phone call from my wife. And he was like, hey, Thomas, your wife wants to talk to you. Because she told me never talk to her again. So I'm not going to call you. I'm just going to, I don't know what's going to go on. And I pick up the phone and she's like, hey, I really don't know why I'm doing this, but I just want you to know that God told me to forgive you for everything. And we're going to get through this together. And that moment, I realized, like, my goodness, thank you, Lord. I walked in obedience to what you said, and it was the scariest thing I've ever had to do in my life. And yet here you are on the backside. And so now I'm still in this hospital for 2 more months. I just had a radical encounter with God, and I'm freaking out. I remember going up to people and saying, hey, 2 days ago, 5 a.m., did you feel that? Did you feel the shaking? Was there a light in your room? And they're like, dude, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I don't know, but there were other people. I remember talking. There were about 4 other guys that were woken up at 5 a.m. around that time. And I just thought it was an interesting, because I'm like, surely like the whole world shook or something. Like it was such a real thing. And I remember for 2 months, man, people thought I was crazy, because now I'm leading a Bible study. I'm sharing the gospel. It's like when I would read the word, I just had an understanding of it. It was the craziest thing. And I was praying for people, and I know looking back, I didn't even realize it, but people thought I was absolutely crazy. I read some of the doctor's notes, and he's like, he claims to have this spiritual encounter with the Lord. He might be borderline schizophrenic. And I'm just like, he thought I was hearing, he's like, he says that God is speaking to him. He might be hearing voices. And I'm like, they think I'm crazy, and
Do you still have those notes?
I think I do somewhere.
You should have brought them so that we can put them up for everybody to read.
And even my wife, after that, and I tried to explain it to her, and I got to be honest with this. God told me not to tell anyone. So in that season, I knew that he did. And he showed me in scripture where Jesus would go perform miracles.
Yeah, and he would tell them.
And he would say, don't go say anything.
Don't tell anybody.
So,
and they would run off and tell everybody.
Exactly. So after I felt like God was saying, don't tell anyone, he showed me in scripture where he does that, and I ignored it. And he was probably trying to protect me. I don't know. But my wife thought I was going crazy. She talked to the doctor and said, I don't know what's happening to my husband. The pastors all thought I was going crazy. I'm just, I had
You're like, wait a minute, but you're the one that told me to believe this stuff.
Well, yeah, I had a very hard time for a little bit. But I knew at that moment,
God is so mysterious.
my life was never going to be the same again. And 2 months later, I got released from the hospital, and all the criminal stuff is kind of processing. I'm in veterans court. All the charges were all misdemeanor related, and I probably had 12 different charges of, stealing drugs from evidence, the DUI, the reckless endangering, official misconduct, and it was all going through the Veterans Court process. And um, you know, I got out, and now I'm home, and my wife is with me, and we're just trying to move on in life. And I knew that I was called to ministry. I had no clue what that meant. And I remember going to an Assembly of God church, and I met with Pastor Jim, and one of the godliest men. I get emotional just because I never had a dad, and Pastor Jim was the first person outside of my wife to believe in me. And I remember meeting with him and just kind of sharing my experience and what had happened. And immediately he just started this relationship with me. He started mentoring me. We started meeting every week. And I kind of felt like, okay. And I was praying. I'm like, God, what are you calling me to? I don't know if I'm called to pastor. I have no clue what any of this means. And the Lord said, Thomas, I'm calling you to broken people. And specifically broken men, in that season that we were in. And I went to my pastor with this, and I'm like, Pastor Jim, I don't know what this means. This is what God spoke to me. Maybe it's with Mighty Oaks. I thought surely, I really had a desire for the veteran and first responder community. Cause I didn't want any cop or veteran to ever have to walk through what I walked through. And I thought, you know what, for the rest of my life, I'm just going to spend sharing the gospel with veterans and first responders. And, Pastor Jim said, have you ever heard of Teen Challenge? I'm like, no, I don't feel called to teenagers. So I don't even really want to look into that.
That was my first reaction.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me, I was like, why are you asking 35, 42 years old?
Yeah. So I'm like, no. And he's like, well, let me say this. When you talk about broken people, this is the epitome of broken people. And so I started looking into it, and he goes, here's the book, The Cross and the Switchblade. That's kind of the story. Look at their website, and then let me know what you think next week. And I read that whole book in like a day. I remember I went home and I read the whole thing. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this is an amazing thing. I think this is what I'm called to. Because David Wilkerson would walk in the spirit, and there would be amazing supernatural encounters happening. I'm like, that's what happened to me. And there's a ministry that does this. And so we're a few months into this, and I kind of feel drawn in that direction. And now I remember, I want to take us back to my house with my wife. And several months into this, and I remember being at home in the kitchen, and I was cooking dinner. I had gone through and bought all new doors, and I tried to really fix all the chaos. I fixed all the holes in the wall, and I was a changed man. I didn't have anger anymore. I wasn't dealing with anything that I was before. I was truly a new creation in Christ. And I remember my wife came up to me crying, and she's like, Thomas, this has been the best few months of our entire marriage. What happened to you? Because now she's starting to realize this encounter that I talked about, this must have been real, because something happened to my husband. Whoever my husband was when he went and committed suicide and was in the hospital, this is a different person. And she's like, what happened to you? And I'm like, babe, when I tell you I had an encounter with Christ, he changed my life forever. And I just we lived a life of chaos, and the way he impacted me. And from that moment forward, my wife said, you know what, this has to be real. And that's when she decided to fully, because she was still sometimes not going to church with me. And like, he just got addicted to something else. But when she saw the real change, she was like, this has to be real. I'm going to follow my husband. And that's when just miracle after miracle after moment of faith started to come up. Now I'm pursuing ministry. I don't know, do I go to Bible college full time and pursue a 4-year degree? Do I just jump into this Teen Challenge thing? I don't know what this looks like. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to go to this 2-year ministry school. I'm going to do it in as fast as I can. I did it in, I think, 3 or 4 months. And me and Pastor Jim were talking, and we're like, you know what, let's just start a Teen Challenge in Northern California.
Wow.
So we went through this whole process, and we had a donation. Someone came in the next day and said, hey, we want to donate $70,000 to start this Teen Challenge. And then a church came in and said, hey, we have a whole church building with a parsonage. We're going to donate the whole thing so that we can start this Teen Challenge. So things are happening. We feel led to do this. God is providing. And during this time, my wife and I remember I was praying, and God's like, Thomas, I want you to sell your house and move in your 28-foot travel trailer with 3 kids and a dog. And I'm like, why would I do that, Lord? And surely you could tell me to do that, and maybe I'll do it, but there's no way I'm going to be able to tell my wife we're going to sell our house, because I never thought I'd own a house again. I thought going into ministry, I'm never going to make any money. Surely I'm a felon now. I'm never, ever going to be able to have a career again. I'm never going to buy a house again. I'm not going to sell the only house that we have at the risk of never owning a house again. And I'm like, you know what, God, here's what we'll do. And I kind of put a fleece out, and I was like, Lord, if my wife comes up to me and says to sell the house, I'll know it's from you. And sure enough, the next morning, my wife walks up to me and she goes, you know what? I had this thought. What if we sell the house and move into the trailer? I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So, we decide, you know what? And then I tell her, I'm like, well, it's crazy you would say that, because God, when I was praying last night, told us that we need to sell the house. And, we, of course, that was our first moment together of hearing the voice of God and stepping out in faith. And we sold our house and had no idea what that meant. We moved into our travel trailer with 3 kids and a dog in the winter in Oregon. Pipes were freezing. I mean, it was just chaos. And we went on this journey to launch this teen challenge in Northern California. I went down to Oakland with their teen challenge, inner city Oakland, gang violence. And I remember walking on that campus. As soon as I got out of my truck, all these guys, and I'm talking Hispanic cartel gang members that are now in teen challenge. As soon as I get out, they're like, you're a cop, aren't you? And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, they just knew.
What gave it away?
Yeah. And I'm like 6 months into this, and I was still, I looked, I've let a lot of the mannerisms go. But man, I looked like a cop. I talked like one, I walked like one, and they just knew it. And I didn't want that, cause I'm 6'8", maybe it was 12 months into this now. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And now I'm in a ministry setting, training to be a director so we can launch one.
That is amazing.
Yeah. And, these moments of testing came. And as I'm there, I get a phone call from Pastor Jim, and he said, hey, that church that we're going to use as a teen challenge, the foundation is terrible, so we can't do it anymore. And of course, for the first week, I'm like, God, you were leading us in this. Like, what in the world am I supposed to do? We sold our house just in faith, believing that a door was going to open and that you were going to be leading us. And I remember for a moment I was a little bit panicked, and I'm like, we've went all in on this thing. We've sold everything that we have. I don't have a job. I'm down here living in Oakland while my wife's in a trailer with the kids. What in the world are we doing? And a few days later, the president of Adult and Teen Challenge Pacific Northwest was talking with Pastor Jim. He heard my testimony, and he's like, hey, I want to have breakfast with Thomas. So I'm, 13, 14 months into this, I think. My time frame might be off. And we have breakfast. And as we're talking, he's just like, hey, I want to offer you to the position to be the director of a men's campus of Adult and Teen Challenge in Washington State. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I didn't apply for this. I wasn't seeking this. I just felt called to ministry, and then God opened a door on his own. It was an amazing thing. Yeah.
Wow. That is an incredible story. How did you end up in Georgetown?
Yeah. So, we took that role, and it was so much more than we could ever imagine. Now not that it's about, just God provided financially in every way. We're doing better financially than we've ever done in my life. We buy a brand new house. I'm talking brand new, just built. So my family, we all move up there. I'm 18 months after my crash. I'm on federal probation. My federal PO just so happened to used to work with the chief operating officer in Pacific Northwest. So they were really close. So just a total supernatural thing. And we move up there, and honestly, God had a lot of work to do. I hadn't gone to Bible college yet. I'm 18 months into being saved, and now I'm leading a ministry that's doing, 25 men campus. We have life renewal. We have clinical counseling. Our budget's over $1 million a year. I don't know what the heck I'm doing, to be honest. And I was full of pride. And about 18 months in, I felt led, or I felt like I knew how to do ministry better in my pride, and I went and resigned from my position because I didn't agree with how they were doing ministry, and it was all me the whole time. And through that process, though, again, God supernaturally made ways and opened doors, and I started Bible college full time, and made it all the way back to start pastoring a church in Oregon. while we were pastoring in Oregon, I had Teen Challenge come back down. I realized that all of the things that I had disagreed with, it was simply my pride and not understanding. And so I called the president and I said, listen, I'm sorry for all of that. Like, and God was taking me on a journey. And we had Teen Challenge come speak at our church, and I'm sitting in the back, and I remember thinking, my goodness, I'm supposed to be in this ministry. And I told my wife that, and she just searched Teen Challenge jobs just because I said that, and she saw there was a campus director position in Mississippi, and she's like, you should call them or apply. And I'm like, babe, this whole journey, I've never applied for a job, never once. I got asked to be the president or the director in Washington. After I resigned, within a week, I got asked to be a project manager, and I was leading a construction company, didn't apply for that. And then I got asked to pastor a church, didn't apply for that. So this whole journey, I haven't been like applying. God has just been opening doors. So I really didn't want to apply, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to call Matt Milliman, and I'm going to have a conversation with him.
That's my dude.
Yeah, he's amazing. And we talked, and now I'm starting to feel like God might be asking us to do this. And then my wife's like, yeah, Jackson, Mississippi, they have a water crisis, highest murder rate like in the world. We're not doing this. And I'm like, hold on.
Pack your bags.
You're the one that found this. But I kind of went back and forth, and I was like, you know what? Every decision we've ever made, we've had unity in.
Mm-hmm.
God has spoke to me. God has spoke to my wife. So if we're not going to do this, maybe we shouldn't. And, Matt, I love him to death as a leader. I love him as a brother. And he's like, you know what? Why don't you guys just fly out here? And I'm like, all right, you know what? Why are we going to say no without at least going out there and checking it out?
Yeah.
So we flew out, and you've obviously been out to the campus. If you're a director in Teen Challenge, this is the campus to be a director at. It's every director's dream, because you'll have some that are just houses, you'll have some that are smaller, but I mean, we got several acres. We have a gym, we have a basketball court, we have weight room, we have a beautiful cafeteria, and this is all what's been going on over the years.
Them dudes are out there playing pickleball.
And it hasn't always been like that.
That's right.
Exactly. And we just
that wood shop they have out there is amazing.
A dedicated chapel.
The classrooms are amazing. I mean, look, state of the art.
They always get me with the signs, like for my office. They're not hung up yet, but I still have them, and I'm like, I've got to buy it.
That's right.
Because they're so beautiful, and you can tell they're made with love.
Well, so we're about an hour and a half into this episode, and I know we could talk all day. So
that's wild. Okay.
Yeah, I know it doesn't seem like it, is it? But I have a couple more questions before I wrap it up. Is there a Bible verse or passage that carried you through your darkest moments?
Yeah, there's two. Romans 8:28. For all things work together for good to those who love God and called according to His purpose. And then Matthew 6:33. Seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you.
Amen.
Yep.
And what do you want our listeners and our viewers to take away from your story today?
Really, the big thing is it doesn't matter what mistakes you've made. It doesn't matter how far gone you are. It doesn't matter what your criminal history is. It doesn't matter if you come to God. I'm not saying He's going to just make everything go away, but He can take what the enemy meant for evil and He will use it for good, and that's a guarantee. So wherever you're at in life, God still has a plan and a purpose for you.
Yeah.
So for any men that are out there struggling, how can they get in touch with you, and what can our listeners and viewers do to support Mercy House Adult Teen Challenge?
Yeah. If you need to, if you're a man and you're struggling, if you go to our website, or maybe you guys can post the phone number, just call us. Even if we don't have, we're one of few ministries that if we got, we're full and we have no beds available, we'll still get you in and we'll put you on the couch and wait until there's a spot for you. So just call, we'll make a way. And for women, we're about to open a women's campus very soon, and we'll have the opportunity to do that as well.
Amen. Who's your favorite, Matt Milliman or Josh Cook?
Oh, gosh. I love both of them.
Okay. So, Thomas, thank you for sharing your powerful testimony story with us today.
Thank you.
Your testimony is living proof that God still redeems, restores, and calls people to purpose, even from the darkest places.
That's right.
And thank you for sharing all the hard stuff
Yeah.
and showing that the Lord can do a radical change.
Amen.
Yeah. And I have that phone number. It's 855-893-7333.
Sure it is.
We encourage you to support the incredible work being done at Mercy House Adult Teen Challenge. You can find out more about their Christ-centered recovery ministry and how to donate or get involved at Mercy House's website. And if you believe in what we're doing here at Black Sheep Recovery Warfare, telling these stories, pulling people out of the fire, and pointing them to Jesus, please consider supporting our mission. Share this episode, follow us on social media, and help us spread hope to the ones who need it most. You can find our website at blacksheeprecoverywarfare.org.